All right. Again, thank you everyone for joining us today for our special webinar presentation on electric vehicles and what you need to know about the future of EVs. We are going to go ahead and get our presentation started in just a moment. So again, hello and thank you for joining our event discussing all things electric vehicles. We are really glad to have you all tuned in today to hear about this really timely topic. In a moment, our panelists will present some great info and answer some of your questions. My name is Nicole Reyes and I'm the Development Director with the American Lung Association, and I will also be moderating today's session. Before we begin, I just wanted to share a few housekeeping items to cover. Firstly, this webinar is being recorded and is streaming live on Facebook. Today's session is meant to be interactive and we want to hear from you. To do this, put your questions in the chat box, and for those tuning in on Zoom and in those who are tuning in on Facebook, please put your questions in the comment section. Thank you to those who have already sent in questions. Our panelists will be answering them shortly. Finally, if we are unable to answer all of your questions, we will send out a follow-up email with answers. Facebook listeners, check the comments for instructions on how to send us your email to be included in that. And lastly, we of course want to thank Florida Power and Light Company for powering today's very special webinar, which is being hosted by the American Lung Association. So now at this time, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Our first panelist is Anuj Chokshi. Anuj is a director for the FPL development team for distributed technologies and mobility at Florida Power and Light Company. In this role, Anuj leads the team responsible for the development of electric vehicle infrastructure projects and strategy throughout FPL service area. Under his leadership, DT&M is expanding FPL evolution, a growing electrical vehicle network, including public charging, residential charging, and fleet electrification. Thank you, Anuj, for joining us today. Our second panelist will be Kevin Brenninger. Kevin is a proud EV consumer and enthusiast and owner of a fully electric vehicle. He will speak to the consumer experience and address some of those thoughts and concerns we all might have when considering making the transition to electric. So firstly, let's talk about the impacts on air quality. So naturally, the American Lung Association is a huge proponent for the full transition to EV as a health priority. According to the Zeroing In on Healthy Air report, a national assessment of health and climate benefits. According to the Zeroing In on Healthy Air report, a national assessment of health and climate benefits of zero-emission transportation and electricity, despite decades of progress to clean the air, more than 4 in 10 of all Americans still live in a community impacted by unhealthy levels of air pollution. The combustion of fuels for transportation is a major contributing factor to the health and climate burdens facing all Americans. These sources of pollution also create significant disparities in pollution burdens and poor health. Lower income communities and communities of color are often the most overburdened by air pollution. The transition towards zero emission technologies in the transportation sector can significantly reduce exposures to air pollution, especially in communities with nearby highways, ports, warehouses, or refineries. So with that, Anuj, can you please share with us why FPL has made this a priority in the DT&M division?
Yeah, no, thank you, Nicole, and thank you for having me on the show today. I'm very excited to be here. I do find my role in the mobility space at FPL, it really allows me to be at the forefront of cool and allows me to get involved in really innovative technologies at our company and things that we're exploring in and investing in. And before I begin, as many folks, may not know, right? Florida Power and Light, we're the largest electric utility in the country. And we serve more customers and sell more power than any other utility. And that means providing, clean, affordable, reliable electricity to nearly 12 million people. And that's a lot of people. And I've been with Florida Power and Light nearly 16 years. And over the years, the company's made some very forward-thinking decisions and investments to make Florida a leader in clean energy and sustainability. And we've eliminated coal and from our Florida power plants, and we've modernized our power plants with more efficient natural gas. We're building nearly 30 million solar panels by 2030, and these modernizations, they don't just save our customers billions of dollars with a B, but they're great for the environment. And just last year, we announced this real zero goal to be carbon free by 2045, 100% carbon free by 2045. And that's just, just nearly 10 years from now, right? So Although it seems like a while away, it's definitely, just around the corner as time flies. But in terms of transportation, as you alluded to, we saw in Florida just a few years ago that for the first time, the emissions from the transportation sector exceeded that of the energy sector. And that doesn't necessarily apply to FPL, but more so the overall state. But we know that we could help by helping to accelerate electrification in the state. And that is why it's a priority for us. We know if we electrify Florida, there's tremendous health and environmental benefits. And it's to our beaches, to our air, everything gets cleaner with less carbon emissions, and not to mention to the state's great tourism industry, right? And lastly, I'll touch on, just overall, some of the biggest trends and innovation in clean energy are happening in the EV industry. And this stuff is, receiving statewide, national, and even global attention.
Thank you, Anuj. It's great to hear about, the priorities and why it is such an important priority, because there is such that direct connection to the environmental, the air pollution. Obviously, this is why it is such an important health priority for the American Lung Association. And I think often we don't see that direct connection. So it's really amazing to hear about the priorities and the background from FPL as well. So next, we would love to learn more about the facts and the EV charging infrastructure plans that FPL has, knowing that charging accessibility can be a concern for many folks making the transition to EVs. So Anuj, can you share a little bit more about charging infrastructure with us?
Yeah, no, definitely. So today, Florida, Florida is the second largest state in the nation for EV registrations. And by 2027, it's estimated that 1 out of every 4 vehicles sold in the US will be electric. So one of our goals is to ensure that Floridians feel comfortable driving electric. And one of the barriers to EV adoption is lack of access to charging, specifically public fast charging stations. And so we know, that 85 to 90% of charging, it's going to occur at home. But widespread adoption is really going to require the ability to effortlessly travel long distance. And that's where FPL has a bold plan with our FPL Evolution program, which plans to boost the state's fast charging infrastructure by installing more than 1,000 charge ports at more than 250 locations by 2025. And so we believe this is going to give people less range anxiety, more range confidence to travel wherever they want, whether it's Miami to Disney or Pensacola to St. Augustine. There's going to be charging opportunities available. And our current and future sites are located off major highways and dense metropolitan areas, even less traveled parts of the state, like the smaller corridors. And to help find these sites, we have our FPL Evolution mobile app. It's a very user-friendly app that allows drivers to easily find and start charging sessions.
Very cool. Love to hear that there is an app that makes it easy for folks to be able to find those charging stations. I know range anxiety is a term that you hear a lot when it comes to making the transition to electric. It's often the excuse that kind of go to. So kind of want to flip it over to Kevin at this point. And as a consumer, would love to hear, your perspective on, your experience with charging infrastructure on the road. As we can hear from Anuj, like the plans to expand are amazing. How have you felt that the access to charging infrastructure in general has addressed your range anxiety? And what would you want to share with folks who do have that as that excuse for giving them pause to want to go electric? Oh, and Kevin, you are on mute.
My Zoom faux pas, I apologize for that. Nicole, thank you for having me on the call today. I really appreciate the opportunity to talk about EVs and my experience. I live in Palm Beach County, and I make regular trips up to Orlando and south. And I feel like I have no anxiety around traveling that route because there are charging stations at every rest stop along the way. And like Anuj alluded to, there are apps that you can use to locate and find charging stations wherever you happen to be. And to my kind of surprise, when I first got the cars, that they're almost in plain sight. They're in places like shopping plazas, hotels, wherever you look. Like sometimes you don't really notice, but then you're like, oh yeah, hey, there's a charging station over there. So I don't really have any anxiety around being able to charge my car really at all for the routes that I travel.
That is awesome to hear. And before you go to electric, you kind of don't really notice those charging stations until you are looking for them. And kind of positive factor is they're usually towards the front of a parking lot or a garage. So it kind of gives you a little bit of, that easier access to where you're going. So there's some perks that I've noticed to being able to park up front and while you're getting a great charge for your vehicle as well. So it's good to hear that infrastructure is really helping to support not only local travel, but statewide travel when you're going up to Orlando, et cetera.
Right.
So next, I'd like to talk about affordability. So it's another topic on some individuals' minds is, when we compare gas to electric, obviously we've all seen gas prices. How do you feel that the switch has impacted your vehicle affordability in terms of going gas versus electric? And additionally, how was your experience in terms of like installation of your own, residential charging systems at home as well? And this is
I feel like I got excellent value for the vehicle that I purchased versus a traditional gas vehicle. Really, it's due to the features, the technology, and the performance of the car itself. In my lifetime, I've driven over 500,000 miles, and I can say honestly that driving my EV has been the most enjoyable of all of those miles. The car itself has an app on it where it tracks my electricity usage, and it can compare it versus what I would have spent on gas. And I have saved hundreds of dollars just in the past year, and not to mention oil changes that I don't have to spend money on. So every time that I don't have to take my car to get an oil change, I save another $100 or so. And as far as inputting or installing outlets into my garage at home, that was pretty easy to do. I just scheduled an appointment with my electrician, and I had 2 outlets installed, the total cost being about $900.
That's great. So it sounds like that initial investment was well worth the savings that you're seeing literally on your dashboard, hundreds of dollars in gas savings. So thank you for sharing that. Next, we'd love to hear about just additional background on Florida Power and Light's development, distributed technologies, and mobility programs, as we've hinted, and Anuj has already shared about the EV charging infrastructure. Just would love to hear a little bit more background about the charging programs that are in the works and why they're such a priority for FPL. So I'll turn this over to you, Anuj.
Yeah, sure. So, so for FPL, right, we've long been a proponent of electric vehicles and EV charging. And FPL was the first electric company to place a hybrid electric bucket truck into service back all the way in 2006. And we've been investing in clean transportation technologies for over a decade, right? So it's definitely always been a priority for us. Today, we operate one of the largest green fleets. It's nearly 1,800, clean vehicles. These are like hybrids, plug-in hybrids, fully electric vehicles. And, one of the things I mentioned earlier is that, a key barrier is certainly widespread adoption and lack of infrastructure. And we believe that we can help this barrier by installing more infrastructure. And FPL is very well positioned to do so, right? So it continues to be a priority for us. And now we have some really great programs to enable us to really, be a catalyst in this space.
That's great. So in terms of EV incentives, so I'm actually going to turn this question over to Kevin. So we know that the bipartisan infrastructure law and the Inflation Reduction Act, it has created some new federal investments in EV charging infrastructure, as well as incentives for consumers to purchase EVs. So Kevin, I was wondering if you could share a little with us about how and if this impacted your purchase of an EV and how you feel this has become a positive opportunity for EV purchasers in the future.
Yeah, I'm actually quite envious of those in the EV market today to purchase a vehicle, as there are new tax incentives that have been rolled out. And those appear to be real. I've logged in to different sites to purchase a car just to see what it would be like. And you could definitely save some more serious money there. I actually, unfortunately, bought in a window where The manufacturer that I purchased from, the incentives they initially offered had sunset, and before these had rolled out. So I think there's definitely a more compelling value proposition to buy a car now than even when I purchased mine.
Thank you for sharing that. And I'm sorry that you couldn't take advantage of those incentives, but it is great that they are available to those who are purchasing now at this point to really just even incentivize going electric even further. So we kind of hinted at it a little bit, but you, Anuj, have mentioned, EV adoption across the state of Florida. Would love to hear a little bit more about some of the biggest challenges that we're seeing. Kevin mentioned he has a residential charging station at home, but not everyone has access to having that garage where you can install your own charging station as well. And I hear that there, may be some additional infrastructure that helps those in urban areas. So would love to hear more about some of the challenges related to increasing EV adoption and how, FPL is addressing those as well.
Yeah, no, for sure. So, if you are a homeowner, right, we do have a program called FPL Evolution Home. And this is a program where we'll install and maintain a customer's charging station and provide drivers with unlimited nights and weekend charging, right? So a little bit of a throwback back to the cell phone time, but it's a great program. Again, it's a low monthly fee. We come in and do a full turnkey installation into somebody's garage, and then they receive unlimited night and weekend charging. So it's quite a benefit for those that can take advantage of it. And then for those that don't necessarily have easy access to charging, perhaps they live in a multi-dwelling unit or a place that doesn't necessarily have easy access to a charger, we have what we call the urban fast charger, right? So we're installing fast charging stations, not just along highways and places like that, but we want to make it ubiquitous where people can easily have access to charging, and these are in dense metro areas and other areas where charging access may not be quite as easy, right? So those two mechanisms really allow us to bring charging to folks and really remove any sort of barriers to finding charging. But then, in addition to that, these programs really make the decision to switch to an EV much easier, right? And I'm a little biased, right? I drive an EV, and I definitely feel that EVs outperform conventional vehicles in most of the ways that matter, right? So for one, EVs are fun to drive. Electric motors mean instant and smooth acceleration. I'm sure Kevin can attest to that, right? And most EVs have a 0 to 60 in under 6 seconds. And with no gas motor, they're also very quiet and comfortable. Relevant to the topic at hand, right? They're better for the environment. EVs have zero exhaust emissions, and when they're powered with FPL's clean electricity, have 70 fewer lifetime carbon emissions, right? So that's a fun stat that I pulled out for this topic for this show here. And as far as range, for most of the EVs that are in the market, they have an average range of 250 miles on a single charge. Plenty of range to go day to day, as well as long distance travels. And then we talked about this a little bit, but they're also cheaper to operate, right? So FPL's electricity is still cheaper than today's gas prices, right? Whether they're low or high. And then in addition to that, EVs have around 20 moving parts, and the internal combustion engine has, over 2,000 moving parts, right? So that means less maintenances, no oil changes, exhaust systems, fuel injectors, complex transmissions, that sort of thing. And then lastly, the charging is convenient, right? Especially with Florida Power and Light, you can start every day with a full charge.
And as far as the charging, is it easy, in a couple of hours or just overnight to get that full charge for that full 250-mile range that you mentioned?
Yeah, well, the average commute is probably around 30 to 40 miles, right? So if you were to plug in every day, you would be able to charge your vehicle up, very quickly, right? Maybe in an hour or two. But if you, depleted your EV battery completely, then, at home, it would take, 7-8 hours or so, depending on the type of vehicle. And then on a fast charger, you would charge a significant portion, around 80% of your vehicle in about 20 to 40 minutes.
Oh, wow. That's really good to know. And it's exciting to hear that FPL is kind of full service in terms of, installing the systems as well. I love your kind of nod to the early 2000s, there were free nights and weekends on your cell phone. I love that you are actually kind of adopting that with that energy savings as well. So very great to hear about that full service that FPL provides as well. So I wanted to take at this time a question from the audience that we've received. And they ask, it would be interesting to hear updates. We're talking a lot about personal vehicles that consumers own, but they want to know about zero emission school and transit buses, as well as any electrification programs running in Florida in terms of ports, warehouse sectors, et cetera. So could you talk a little bit about, fleet electrification a little bit?
Yeah, so we're definitely taking a holistic, approach to electrification, right? I talked a little bit about public fast charging, home, but we also have FPL Evolution Fleet, and this is where we work with our commercial customers and provide advisory services to develop sort of these individual strategies for electrification. And for those that are ready to electrify, we have programs to provide turnkey solutions for charging equipment, just like we do for the home program. And so we work with a lot of the, the port operators and different commercial customers to achieve some of these goals, depending on where they are in their electrification journey. And then as it relates to school buses, this is kind of an exciting topic and a good question that has come up. So we partnered with the city of West Palm Beach to introduce two school buses that are being used as activity buses. So we're essentially taking that yellow school bus and making it green. And we've launched in partnership with the city, two electric Type C school buses. And these school buses are used as activity buses to take, children after school to their camps and do field trips over the summer. And these are, just beyond electric school buses, but they're also capable of, taking, used as a transportation resource, but when they're plugged into the charger, they can actually be used as a grid resource, right? So when they're plugged into the charger, we can actually use the power from the batteries to support the grid and backfeed to the grid. So it's a really unique proof of concept that we've put out there. And we expect the growth of electric school buses to, proliferate within the state, starting with a lot of the different school districts and things like that are adopting electric school buses into their fleets and replacing them with aging diesel school buses.
Wow, that is a wealth of amazing information to learn about in terms of the school bus fleets. And we're excited to hear more about that as we see that transition. It sounds like it's going to save a considerable amount of air pollution and really help to service these school bus fleets in the long run. Thank you for sharing that. Our next question is for Kevin, and Kevin, you kind of touched on it a little bit already, but just if you could reiterate the kind of like cost and average time of having your car serviced of electric versus, when you had a gas vehicle.
Well, knock on wood and fingers crossed, I haven't had to have my electric vehicle serviced yet. I've had it 14 months now for this one. So obviously there's a savings there versus having my other gas vehicle, my other car in the family. I've had to take in twice for recalls or different things. So I've been lucky in that regard. So I feel, I leave the house every day with a full charge, so I never have to worry about costs in that regard. It just comes on my monthly FP&L bill, which I would say has probably gone up, I want to say on average of $30 to $40 a month as a result of having the car. So it's much cheaper than what I would have spent on gas.
For sure. I don't think I have spent $30 filling up a tank in a very long time. So that is great to hear that that comparison there. I'm sure everyone appreciates learning about that. This next question is for Anuj. In terms of your charging stations or the installation for residential charging panels, is that something that someone could connect to if you have, the FPL solar panels or is that its own, separate device that would be connected? So not run through, you cannot use your solar panels that you have for FPL, or can you tap into that?
So yeah, so the solar panels would be independent to the home, right? And then the EV charging is independent, right? And one thing to keep in mind, right, is that solar is an intermittent resource, and so we do want to charge our vehicles at night, and so if we're relying solely on those solar panels, then we wouldn't be able to do so. But it does provide the added benefit to have solar on the home and in a clean source. But the EV charging station is independent of the solar.
Sounds good. Thank you for clarifying that for us. Our next question is for Kevin. And this is one I've heard often too, is the autopilot on some electric vehicles. I don't know if your vehicle has autopilot. How do you feel in terms of trusting the autopilot feature? Do you use it often? And what would you have to share with others?
I didn't subscribe to the full autopilot feature that's available in my vehicle, but I do use, it's kind of like cruise control on steroids. It takes over, different functional speed up, slow down. I think a lot of even, conventional gas cars have a lot of these same features. So it works in a lot of the similar fashion. And as far as trusting it goes, the full autopilot, I'm a little hesitant. I'll be honest, I'm a little hesitant there to just kind of see where the technology goes and how it improves over time, before I fully adopt that technology.
Okay, so basically you're not going to be taking any naps on the highway anytime soon, but
you're hands on the wheel at all times.
Yeah. I think that's a good suggestion. And finally, just Anuj, I would love to hear if there's anything else you would love to leave our audience with in terms of, FPL's infrastructure, fleet electrification, and just the future of EVs that you really would want to leave, a final note for our audience that they would need to know.
Yeah, for EVs, right, the future is bright, and we encourage those who haven't had an opportunity to experiencing EV to stay in touch with FPL FPL.com/EV and look for events in the community to where FPL may be bringing some ride and drives and things like that to the community so that they can experience it for the first time. And then from there I think it's it's really the future, and so to stay engaged with it and to sort of stay in touch with FPL.
Absolutely.
on their EV needs.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is the future. And so that website that you mentioned would kind of be the go-to in terms of learning more about installation. If you wanted to order the full service installation at your home for the residential charging, just go right onto the website.
Correct. Yeah. Go on the website. And if you already drive an EV and you're looking to, understand where the FPL Evolution chargers are, then download the FPL Evolution app from either the Google or Apple app stores.
Awesome. So you heard that, folks. You know how to download your app. So just look for that FPL Evolution app, and you can easily find your charging station so that you can avoid that range anxiety. We shouldn't be hearing that term anymore, since it sounds like FPL is obviously addressing that in spades with their infrastructure programs and plans in the future. So it looks like we are just about out of time for any additional live questions. But for the questions we've been unable to get to today, we invite everyone in the audience to please make sure to send an email send an email to the email provided in the chat, and be on the lookout for a response in the upcoming week or so with answers to your questions. But just again, want to thank everyone for attending today's American Lung Association webinar on the future of EVs, powered by Florida Power and Light Company. To learn more about EVs on the American Lung Association side, in addition to the FPL website that Anuj mentioned, we would love for you to check out the lung.org website as well to learn more about our Zeroing In on Healthy Air report, resources, and additional opportunities to engage in the American Lung Association's EV advocacy efforts if you're interested in that. Also, please don't forget to follow the South Florida American Lung Association on Facebook for announcements regarding our next community connections and webinar events, including an event we'll be hosting again with Florida Power and Light next month on residential energy management. You just need to follow the ALA at LungSoFlaw for details. And until next time, just want to give a big thank you to Anuj, Kevin for presenting and providing some really great information for our audience. And of course, to all of you at home who have tuned in today. Together, we can improve life one breath at a time. With that, have a great day, and thank you, everyone.